when people are trying to decide whether they want to go into management, I try to pressure test the why.
So I want to get your insight on this when you were talking about caring about people and leading them. So I actually had a conversation, I think last week, with one of my directors, and we were discussing this idea of, I was asking about his individual contributors and all of that. I had asked him something, I think along the lines of, well, yeah, like which person on your team is a morning person, or like what, who wakes up early, or who's the person that's like the night owl and stuff like that. And, he said something along the lines of, well, that doesn't really, matter. Like we just focus on, in our one-on-ones, we just focus on their metrics and like if they're hitting their goals and things like that. And I said, well, I heard this one speaker in personal development one time say the idea that you can manage or lead somebody without knowing who they are and caring for them is a myth. Like you have to know who they are and care for them in order to lead them. And so I was just giving him examples and like talking with him about this. I felt like I was kind of fishing around because the problem is that it's not a science. Because if I say like get to know them, it's not like you can, well, some people might take that as like, and let's have a meeting and all of a sudden start interrogating them. It's this really weird. Yeah.
What are your kids' names?
Yeah. So how do you, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but how would you go about explaining to a new leader how to have a personal relationship with the people you're managing, but not crossing boundaries?
I suppose one of the things that I do is when people are trying to decide whether they want to go into management, I try to pressure test the why. And so when I went into management, I just fell ass backwards into it. You know what I mean? You do good on it when you start out, you write code, you build systems, you do good at that, you get responsibility for a larger system. Before you know it, you're leading others in a technical fashion. And then before you know it, people are like, hey, you want to manage people? And it just seems like, okay, that's the next rung on the ladder. Let me try that. But that's usually not a great recipe for success. But the truth is that a lot of us, that's how we get started. And in hindsight, you look back and you realize, wow, I've made a lot of mistakes. But I'm glad that somebody gave me the opportunity to try that. But ultimately, when somebody says, oh, I want to be a manager, or I want to lead larger teams, or, whatever the thing may be, I try to tease apart the why. And so if you ask, if you try to tease apart, like, what are your motivations? Well, hey, what do you think this is going to look like? Oh, well, I'll get to call the shots. And, obviously there's elements of, being a manager is, generally a manager has to be a leader. A leader does not have to be a manager. But there are parts of being a manager, if you've never done it before, that might seem attractive. Oh, they got to make the call on X. Or, oh, they got to, set somebody's performance review rating, and that has a lot of impact. But the truth is, most of the time, the job of a manager isn't always directly rewarding. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it that's thankless. There's, you got to approve expense reports and timesheets and deal with all kinds of issues between people in an organization, help deal with them without anybody ever knowing. It's a fairly thankless job a lot of the time. But the thing that makes a difference for me is if I can affect somebody's life positively, if I can in some sense be of service, that gives me a personal reward. I find that rewarding. And it doesn't have to be, plastered on a newspaper. The reward is actually, for me, is actually private. The fact that I was able to make a small difference in somebody's life. And so I try to tease apart the why and find out if there's an element of wanting to be of service in what they want to do. And if I can't find that element of wanting to be of service, that is enabling other people, helping them to grow, unlocking business results, helping people to overcome their challenges and connect better with others. If I can't find that servant leadership aspect, then I usually call that out in people and say, look, I'm not seeing that. And my experience is that's the foundation of good leadership. So it doesn't mean that I won't support you in becoming a manager, but I think that that's a component that I think is an important part, and that you would either need to bring to the table or grow in the direction of wanting to develop that.
And you can tell so much by how they react to that advice.
Yeah. They're like, whoa, hey, I don't want to fill out TPS reports. There's all kinds of things that come with being a manager that aren't always fun. And so when you paint the picture of what it looks like, I would say half the people walk away from it. You do have to do a little bit of a reverse sell, because I think that it's different than a lot of people realize. Maybe in the command and control days, which I've never lived in, it was more fun because you had, direct power. You could, control all the things. But that's just not real life, at least not in the space of building software. You've got brilliant people that are smarter than you, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I help them to succeed without getting in their way? And it's tricky business.